I'm sure many of you will have heard of the word mindfulness and probably know that it's about doing something in a way that takes you so completely and gently into the moment or the now. But in this video, I'm going to explain mindfulness and explore it further and consider why it might be a good idea to practice it. So let's start by thinking about what mindfulness might be. Mindfulness is described by most people as bringing your attention completely into the moment and without judgment. By judgment, we mean having thoughts about how good or bad something is. So it's doing things without deciding how good or bad they are or how well you're doing. Instead, what you are doing just is. The kind of things that are suggested to help you practice being mindful include eating an apple using all your senses so that your focus is completely involved in eating the apple and nothing else, focusing on your breathing, listening with full attention to a song that you love, doing yoga, exploring a space like a bookshelf using your fingertips only, staring into the sky and watching the clouds, scanning your body and noticing any emotions, feelings or sensations, going for a walk and checking in on each of your 5 senses, or painting or colouring a detailed picture. So if mindfulness is considered to be a good thing, why might this be so? Well, any activity that brings you fully into the moment so that all that you are aware of is what is immediately in front of you and what you're experiencing directly through your 5 senses means you do not have thoughts about the past or thoughts about the future. Thoughts about the past can be positive, like having memories of wonderful times, but often when we're engaged in thoughts about the past, especially the recent past, we can ruminate or fixate on something that went wrong, something we wish we hadn't said or done, or something we regret. These kind of thoughts can occupy our minds and trigger negative feelings. You could say that this kind of thinking is totally unnecessary as it achieves nothing. Thoughts about the future can also be positive, like when we really look forward to something, but quite often they can include worrying or being anxious about how well something is going to turn out. Sometimes we can catastrophize about the future. This is where, when we're feeling anxious, we start to think that everything that can go wrong will go wrong. You could say that this kind of thinking is totally unnecessary as it achieves nothing. Thinking about the future can also unsettle us, as we can incessantly be making plans, pushing forward and thinking about what we must do next, so much that we forget to just be in the present and enjoy this moment. So in theory, being mindful should release you from negative and consuming thoughts as you instead become completely consumed by the task that you're doing mindfully. The mindful task uses up your whole being so that there's no room left for anything else like unsettling thoughts or negative emotions. Because doing things mindfully can take you completely into the moment, you exist purely with your awareness in the now or this very moment. We do actually only ever exist in the now, or now, if you think about it, but quite often our mind is so full of thoughts that many of us rarely really notice or exist fully in this moment. In a way, mindfulness might better be called mindlessness, as it can empty our heads of unnecessary thinking. If you can get into this moment fully, it can be really blissful, as you free yourself from agitating and nagging thoughts. Most of the time, right now is actually just fine, with nothing bothering us, and when we fully exist in this moment, we can feel calm, peaceful and content. The moment we exist in, or now, is fine for much of the time, and it's mostly only made not fine when we are consumed by thoughts and emotions that are nearly always relating to something that's happened in the past or something that might happen in the future, even if that's the near future or something that's just happened. Occasionally, the moment of now is uncomfortable, say if you were really hot or something was hurting you. In these cases, you can most often change something to prevent further discomfort. Sometimes though, you need to accept the situation, but that's not what this video is going to explore. Now I'm going to consider mindfulness further and how it relates to becoming a happier person. To do this, I need to introduce the idea of the ego. So what's the ego? The ego is what many people only think of themselves as being. It's the only thing they're aware of. The ego includes our identity, for example our name, our possessions, skills or what we're good at, knowledge and our relationships. It also includes our likes and dislikes, our thoughts, our emotions, our opinions and so on. It's what we believe about ourselves, it's our self-image, it's who we think we are, and if any of it feels threatened, criticised or attacked, our ego can react, and not usually in a helpful way. Now I'm going to ask, how does the ego behave? Well, another thing about the ego is, it has needs. It needs to feel it's better than other people. It's the part of us that compares ourselves to others and makes judgments. It's competitive. It needs for us to feel more important and successful than others. It often needs to be right. Sometimes it needs people to understand fully that we are the victim of an unfair situation, and it's outraged by the injustice and decides our persecutors are terrible, sometimes even in situations that turn out to be a simple misunderstanding. The ego can't be satisfied, not for long. It's always searching for the next thing. It makes you feel like you're never good enough and that you're lacking in something. It needs to do things all the time, think things, compare things, feel things, and it fights to make you think that it's the only part of you that exists. The ego is quite self-absorbed, and it stops you existing in the here and now by its constant nagging for you to meet its needs. Our ego can make us search for happiness in the wrong places, and it keeps us dissatisfied. It also tells us negative things. Some people's egos tell them things like, you'll never be happy, or you'll never be good enough. And if these people live with just the awareness of the ego, this is what they will fully believe. For many people, they only live life from the awareness of the ego, and this does not make them happy. This is the way most of the world is, and so it's so normal, many of us believe it's the only way to exist. So if this ego existence makes you unhappy, what can be done? Well, this next part is the part many people decide is just too odd and often reject right from the beginning because they have not yet seen its worth, although many teachers throughout history have tried to give this message. And this is it. You are not just your ego, you are also pure consciousness. It's this pure consciousness that some people experience when they are being mindful, when they meditate, when they take deep breaths, or when they first look at something beautiful and thoughts are suspended for a few seconds. It's the clear space without thoughts. It's existing without thinking. It is about just being, and it creates a feeling of bliss, calm, and connection. Some people describe it as being fully present. Most people never just be and spend their whole lives just doing with a head continuously full of thoughts. Some people get glimpses of pure consciousness now and then. Some people practice being present regularly, and a small number of people can just be much of the time. Once you have had a glimpse of consciousness without thinking, you can expand it. The more you practice it, the easier it becomes. So how does this make you happier? You might well ask. Well, once you can see the ego from outside of it and felt pure consciousness or presence, or in other words, have felt what it's like to just be, you can see that the ego is not the important thing that you once thought it was, when you fully existed inside it and believed that that was all there was of you. You can see that the ego is not the only part of you. In fact, you don't really need it, and it doesn't really serve you very well. The ego can certainly prevent you from being happy. Much of the world lives mostly with awareness only from inside the ego, so it feels more normal to do this. When you learn to just be, you start to disidentify with your thoughts, your opinions, your need to be right, your need to be better than others, your need to judge others, the feeling that you need to be constantly successful, the need to keep driving on, and so on. To disidentify with the ego seems incredibly counterculture and against the grain, but it does make life so much more pleasant. As you learn to step outside the ego and spend more time just being, the benefits include things like you become far less automatically reactive or defensive, you accept people have different opinions to you without feeling threatened, you use thought more efficiently as you do less unnecessary thinking like ruminating or catastrophizing. You don't feel consumed by your negative thoughts. You see your thoughts arrive and can decide whether they are important or not. You see your emotions arise as they arise, and therefore you can manage them rather than them control you. You stop blaming other people for how you feel and take responsibility for your own reactions. You feel far less agitated and dissatisfied. You free yourself from conditioned responses based on coping strategies from the past that probably no longer serve you well, such that you react more flexibly. You become more creative as your thinking becomes less rigid. You don't feel the need to seek others' approval. You become more accepting of others. You feel more connected to everyone. You start to feel less competitive and more compassionate towards others, and you become happier. When you just be, it doesn't mean you disappear, it means you become more fully you. And as you spend more of your time in a state of consciousness, presence, or being, whether through mindfulness, meditation, walking in nature, swimming in the sea, having a massage, or learning to sit peacefully and getting completely into the moment, the smaller your ego with its demanding needs and ways of behaving will become. It's about being able to be in the blank canvas place of existence outside the ego, the place where agitating thoughts don't bother you, a place of bliss and tranquility. This will, of course, make you happier. And even if this all sounds just a bit too weird to you, which is understandable because such a small number of people in this world practice being present, try and keep it in mind, because as life goes on, you might slowly start to see it making more and more sense to you. So what have we learnt? Well, we've learnt that mindfulness should really be called mindlessness. We've learnt that mindfulness is about existing in this moment, or the now. We've learnt that the ego is what most people identify with, and they believe that that is all there is to them. We've learnt that existing in the now, or this moment, can help you disidentify with your ego. And we've learnt that when you can actually sit in a state of pure consciousness with no thinking going on, you can learn to see yourself as separate from your ego. It can actually become smaller and you end up a lot happier.